Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fam Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, this is our Week 4 preview for Section 1AA football. We're beyond the halfway point now, especially in the regular season. 7 weeks in the regular season. Now you're starting to take a look at those league standings. You know, you're going to have teams have an opportunity to try to make their case to get into the playoffs. Teams that have got off to a slow start, you're going to start seeing that anticipation to try to turn things around quickly. But let's just start by welcoming Mars. How's it going?
It's going well, man. I feel like the season's kind of flying by, and I'm just excited to see how really the playoff picture starts to lay out. I mean, in week 4? Yep. I mean, it's already, we're already halfway. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, 7 weeks in the regular season, then we get to playoff time. But I want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, if you guys are new, we cover Section 1 football. I mean, by this point, you got to be a fan at this point, right? But again, we appreciate everyone coming and watching our stuff. And if you are new, make sure you guys follow us on all our social media accounts that you see on our on the page. You guys can get all our content on our website at famsportsny.com, as well as merchandise and donations to the show. And we appreciate any donations sent by our viewers. And what's going to happen is we'll go over the games on slate. I'll kind of talk a little bit about where the leagues are. And then we'll preview a couple of games, and then we'll give our game picks. So let's get right into it, Mars. The games on slate this week. Saturday game, Yonkers Forest 1-2 at Fox Lane. That's 2-1. That's a non-league game. Mamaroneck 3-0 at Scarsdale, who's 1-2. That is a League A game. Yonkers Brave 0-3 at New Rochelle, 2-1. That is a league game. Friday, Arlington 1-2 at Spring Valley, who's 0-3. That's a league game. Clarkstown South 2-1 at Suffern, who's 3-0. That is a league game. Carmel 3-0, coming off that big victory last week, is at John J. East Fishkill, who's 2-1. That is a non-league game. Ossining 1-3 at RCK is a League C game. North Rockland 1-2 at Mount Vernon. That is a non-league game. And White Plains in League C at Portchester, who's also League C. That is a league game. And when you kind of look at the leagues right now, this is where they stand right now. Things obviously can change. League A, the top two teams make it to the playoffs. And right now, Mamaroneck is at the top, 3-0 in the division. Mount Vernon and New Rochelle are both tied at 2-1, but Mount Vernon is 2-1 in league play. So right now they have the tiebreaker, but New Rochelle has only played one league game. They have a lot of league games to go. Scarsdale is right behind them, even though they're sitting at 1-2. They've only played one league game as well, and then followed by Yonkers Forest and Brave. And when you look at League B, Mars, they have 4 teams that are going to make the playoffs from this division, or this league, excuse me. Right now, Carmel and Suffern, both 3-0, both 2-0 in the division, sit up on top. Clarkstown South, 2-1. They lost last week, but it wasn't a division game, right? They're still 2-0 in the division. North Rockland is at the 4th slot right now, 1-2. They're 1-2 in the division. Arlington is at the 5th spot, who's 1-2, but they're 0-2 in the division, and followed by Spring Valley, who's 0-3. 0-3 in the division. And then go to League C. There's 2 teams in the playoffs that qualify for the playoffs in that league as well. White Plains, Fox Lane, and John J. East Fishkill are all tied 2-1. All 3 of them 2-0 in league play, so really interesting division. Followed by Ossining, who's 1-3. They're 1-2 in the division. RCK's 1-2. They're 0-2 in the division, and Portchester 0-3, who's 0-3 in division. So that's where the leagues are right now. And let's go over a couple of the top matchups, Mars. And let's start with a C league game. I mentioned them in the previous matchup. Ossining 1-3 in League C at RCK, who's 1-2 in League C. Again, a big-time league game. RCK is 2-1 versus Ossining. They have won 2 straight versus Ossining. Last time they played each other was in 2019, and both these teams are trying to make their way back into the division race. Ossining lost to John J. East Fishkill last week. RCK had a big win at Clarkstown South to get them going in the right direction, but that was not a league game. But let's start with Ossining, Mars. So offensively, we know that they run that physical wing T concept. They like to control the clock and run behind that physical offensive line, behind Bernardo and Cruz. I'm looking at a guy like their quarterback, Nick Gallery. I mentioned him a few times, a junior. He's their most explosive player with Francis out. And right, he had a rushing touchdown last week, 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. And again, the bell cow and Francis, don't know where he is physically. I know he's missed a couple of games, but Gio Jean-Pierre, the young running back, only 5'9", has really stepped up. 2 weeks ago, he had 2 touchdowns. And I'm expecting them, again, RCK is big up front. attack the off tackle, attack the outside. It won't be easy with that size, but look for Nick Gallery and look for Jean-Pierre to try to get on the outside and to run some type of play action, because RCK has known to give up big plays defensively, and you really want to test their discipline. When I look at the defensive side of the ball, I thought they played tough for 3 quarters last week against John Jay. They stopped the run against the big offensive line, going up against that RC offensive line who had a lot of success last week. So it's really going to be key for the front 7 on the defense. Bernardo, he had an interception last week. He's one of their most active guys. But some other guys on the D-line like Andrew Reed and Justin Santos, they're going to have to be big. And if you can force RCK to get into passing situations, you might have the best chance, where a guy like one of your defensive backs, Medina, can make plays. He had a pass deflection last week. When I go to RCK, Mars, I thought they really found their identity last week running the ball. The offensive line stepped up, and I talked about it on the show. They like to run behind those big offensive tackle and Nunez. But some of the other guys, like offensive guard Kitzwager, their tight ends, their fullbacks, they blocked really well last week against a tough Clarkstown South team. And they were able to run the ball pretty efficiently. And it starts with their running back, Avant Owens, downhill runner last week, 134 yards rushing, Mars, 3 touchdowns, and their quarterback really stepped up, and I was glad to see Camacho. He's a big play guy. He's a fast guy. Last week he had 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 really long one that helped spark this team. So offensively, it was a really good sign. But defensively, Mars, they give up 32.7 points a game. That is last in League C and 16 out of the 18 AA teams. So defense has been the big Achilles heel for RCK, Mars. They just give up way too many big plays and points. But I look at one guy who made some big plays for them last week, and he's one of the best players in the class, John Capo. He had an interception, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. He was a big-time player for them, and those turnovers is what helped spark that upset victory last week, and he's going to have to play big, Mars. What do you want to talk about on this one?
And when you take a look at these two teams, I feel like it's good. They're both run-heavy style of offenses, and when you look at really the matchups that I think are going to be key to watching this game. It's going to be really, I think, the Ossining front 7 against RCK's defense. I think that if RCK's defensive line can really step up, right, and actually, really anchor down and slow down this run and give their offense more of ability, because like you said, they were one of the lowest defenses in all of Section 1AA, and I think that that's going to be something important for them to improve on. And I'll say the same thing the other way around. If RCK's offensive line versus Ossining's defensive front 7, it's the same thing. I feel like now, granted, I think Ossining has not had the defensive struggles that RCK has had, but I think that it's really going to depend on the front 7 on both sides of the ball to really establish who has more control in the game. It's going to depend on who has the time of possession and which running backs can find the holes, right? Yep. And I think that whoever can do so is definitely going to have the advantage here, and I think that it's going to be an interesting matchup for sure.
Hey, let's go to another matchup, Mars, and this is a non-league game. North Rockland 1-2 in Class B at Mount Vernon, who's 2-1 in A. Again, non-league, but this is where you want teams to get into a groove on their overall record. These teams have not played each other since 2011. It's been 10 years since they played. Last week, North Rockland won versus Spring Valley, and Mount Vernon is trying to recover from their loss to Mamaroneck last week. They took a really tough loss. But let's start with North Rockland. Offensively, Mars, they go into all the spread looks. We talk about the up-tempo. We talk about the spread. But I love that they've really focused in on a physical running game last week behind that offensive line led by guys like Vargas. Getting their running back, Zay Frazier, he had 2 rushing touchdowns last week, has been really, really solid for them for this start of the season. And I'm glad that they focused in on him. And I think the counter game and the off-tackle game against a big front in Mount Vernon can work. And Mamaroneck did a really good job of exploiting it. And I think North Rockland can as well. And to me, another thing that can really work is getting their quarterback Patterson on the edge. Again, they do that a lot of option stuff where it's power reads, zone reads, and stuff like that. And if the quarterback can get out on the edge and some quick pass attacks to guys like Becker and Farrar, who are weapons. And I thought Mamaroneck did a pretty good job of passing on Mount Vernon. There even were some drops. They had more opportunities that they didn't capitalize. I think North Rockland, if they can get the run on the edge and then the play action off of it to some of their weapons out there, I think they can do some damage to this defense. And when I look at the defensive side on North Rockland, it's a strong unit, right? They're ranked 7 out of the 16 teams in points allowed so far, and getting penetration against that big offensive line. They're big guys, right? Very big guys in Mount Vernon. but they're not the fastest guys. And so if they can use their athleticism up front and cause some disruption, I think they can have some success. On the defensive line. Fulgencio, again, Frank's finest guy, really disruptive guy, had a solid, he had a couple pressures last week, made some plays. And another guy who's kind of their middle linebacker edge guy, Hernandez, defensive end Duplin. These are guys who are going to have to create that pressure that I talk about and keep their quarterback inside the pocket and keep some of these speedy guys, force them to run in between the tackle box. Tackling in space is going to be huge because, Mount Vernon, they have speed, but they also shown the capability they could turn the ball over, right? And if they can create that penetration, it'll give them more opportunities. When I look at Mount Vernon, Mars, I want to see how they respond from that tough loss that they had last week. They got their butts kicked. Let's just call it what it is. And offensively, I want to see this offensive line step up because they gave up way too much penetration last week. And I think they're better. They're better than what they showed. And I'm looking to see them step up this week. I look at their quarterback, Johnson, who had some of the struggles. I'm looking to see if he can get back on track. He was limping a little bit at the end of the game. He got beat up pretty good. So I'm interested to see how he plays. And to me, I feel like they got to get their guy Gary involved. I mean, this guy's a guy who lines up running back, wide receiver. He's a dynamic playmaker. He can create some plays, especially in open field. And on the defensive side, listen, they like to, they gave up 50 points. And when you give up 50 points, there's not much that went well. And they like to be aggressive. They like to cause penetration. Those big guys are hard to move up front. And so you get those linebackers an opportunity to roam around. But they have to be disciplined. They have to tackle better than what they did last week. And if they don't, it's going to be another long day for them, Mars. What do you want to talk about in this one?
Yeah, this game is interesting because I feel like you have Mount Vernon, who's looking to make a bounce back, game, and then North Rockland, who is really just trying to continue this momentum now. And now, granted, North Rockland had some early loss in the season. That was a very close fight. But I think that when you look at how North Rockland has been playing recently, I feel like they're ticking in the right direction. I feel like when you look at their offense, I think that they have they have an effective run, especially when it comes into all these different types of spread looks that they can hit you with. But I think they need to continue doing so. I feel like when they start hitting their stride is when they really establish the run, right? Because then from there you can start building on the play action and really start to get the defense on their heels, and they don't know where you're gonna hit them next. When you look at how they should win here, and I agree with you, I think it's gonna be plays off the tackle, and I think that getting to the outside, getting away from this big interior that Mount Vernon has, is definitely going to play to their advantage. Defensively, you definitely have to just cause, some undisciplined plays from Mount Vernon. You have to make them make a mistake. I think that's going to be something that defensively, I think you just have to cause some mayhem up front, and really just make these offensive linemen struggle to pick up any sort of stunts that you might be sending. From Mount Vernon's perspective, it's really has to be a team effort all around to have a bounce back victory, and a lot of it has to do with starting with defensively. I think that they need to regroup. They need to kind of slow down the pace, and they need to be a bend but don't break type of defense. Like, you can't give up the big plays. You gave up too many points, and it was just
50 points.
It's way too much for any defense, let alone high school defense. I think that it has to be from the defensive point of view of we need to slow down the game, slow down the offense, right? Narrow down what they can do, and you have these big guys, right? You have these big dudes that are very athletic, but you need to really be disciplined and make the tackles when they come to your way. And offensively, I think that they need to, like I said, make your playmakers get in the open field and give them a chance to make a play, and then from there you just have to roll with the punches. You know what I mean? I think that they can do it though.
Let's go to another game. This is a really intriguing league matchup, Mars. Mamaroneck 3-0 in League A at Scarsdale, who's 1-2 in League A. And these two teams are 6-6 versus each other since 2004. But Scarsdale has won the last two games in this matchup, and the last one was in spring where they won 34-0. But Mamaroneck is off to a hot start. They won last week versus Mount Vernon in impressive fashion. Scarsdale won at White Plains, which seemed to be a little bit of an upset. But let's start at the Mamaroneck side. I mean, this is a huge event. I talk about Mamaroneck's first place. Scarsdale is a little bit out of the picture, but they've only played one league game. This is a big-time league game that's going down. And offensively, the rush attack is very potent. I mean, they had some missed opportunities, I thought, in the passing game last week versus Mount Vernon. Still pretty darn efficient, right? Starts with their quarterback, Jason Cox. We raved about him all year so far. And last week, he was really efficient. 11 of 15 Mars, 203 yards, a passing touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. Damari Hamilton, he had 2 touchdowns. I mean, that duo is a dynamic group. But it has to start with the offensive line play. They have played pretty darn strong to start this season. Guys like Sommers and Dutton. But they're going up against a scrappy Scarsdale front, and they caused a lot of penetration last week, so I'm interested to see how Mamaroneck's offensive line plays. And I'm interested to see this pass attack going up against a young secondary. I played pretty darn well last week against a White Plains offense, but they were helped out by that front getting a lot of pressure, and I'm interested to see how the offensive line handles that pressure this time around. The skill guys versus the Scarsdale secondary is a really intriguing matchup for me. Defensively, Mars, Mamaroneck, Mamaroneck plays offense, and they played it well in the spring. They played well so far this year. The big difference between the spring and now is the defense, and the defense is number 2 in points allowed out of the 16 AA teams so far. And it starts with this defensive line, guys like Sandrum, linebackers Paneros, guys like Bennett, Ramsey. These guys have stepped up, and they're going against an option football team, right? And we talk about it. Option football is about being disciplined, attacking your reads. You want to try to get them under 3 yards a carry. If they hit 3 yards, it's a win for you, right? If they get to 3.5 to 4, it's a loss. So it's a constant battle, bump and grind game. But you want to get them to 3 yards or less, and that's got to be the focus. Tackle your reads. Don't overcompensate. This is a group that they can attack each. They have pretty much an option route for each gap, right? And they can hit, multiple different spots. Obviously, the focus has got to be stopping Clance. When you look at Scarsdale, Mars, offensively, they have that 3-headed monster, right? It starts with their fullback Clance, who does a lot for this team. He had 102 yards last week, 2 rushing touchdowns. He's a guy who can run inside, and they can run him outside, whether it's off tackle or pitches. He's shown that he can do both, which makes things really difficult. But their quarterback, Brian Nicholas, is another guy. He didn't have that many yards last week. He didn't have to, but he orchestrated well. He didn't turn the ball over. They only had 1 turnover, Mars. He was smart with the football. He only had 36 yards rushing, 25 passing, but he was smart. He made the right reads, and that was really important. And then their guy, Baldwin, and we talked about him on the show. He's become a nice spark plug for them. He had 44 yards rushing last week, but this is a big play guy for them. And another running back, Killian, he's a guy who can make some plays happen as well. But those guys, again, I talked about it. They want 3.5 to 4 yards a game. They're a bump and grind offense. They want to control the tempo, control the clock, and really wear down a defense. Again, I talk about the efficiency, Mars. They only had 1 penalty and 1 turnover. That's going to be big. If they can play that kind of smart football, they have a good chance of winning it. Defensively, the D-line, they're not the biggest guys, right? But they were a scrappy bunch that got after the quarterback last week, and they're going to have to do that again. Against Mamaroneck and against Cox. It's going to be really important to slow down this rush attack. And I look at the defensive line, I look at the linebackers, guys like Kahali, Lowy, Glantz. When you go, if they can slow down this potent rush attack and get them into second and third and long, Cox won't be as efficient. And you really want to test if you can keep him in the pocket, if you can, put him behind the chains and see how he plays with that. And then allow your secondary, who is young, right? But if they can get pressure, there is guys like Baldwin out there who has made plays in the secondary, and he had an INT last week, but they're going to have to tackle well in space. But I do think if they can get pressure up front, it'll make that secondary's life easier like they did last week, which ended up in a win, Mars. So what do you want to talk about?
When I look at this game, I feel like this is definitely a big-time matchup because of the fact that these two teams have had a history, right? They've always been in
split
kind of
6-6. Yep.
Yeah, they've always been in the
matchups.
same. They've always been on the same side of the division. Whenever they used to only have 2 divisions, and I feel like it's always been an interesting fight between these two. But when I look at this year, I think that when I look at the Mamaroneck offense, they have a very impressive group of skill players that just been playing very well, and the chemistry has been really working out. But the biggest thing I always focus on, and you notice I always talk about the offensive line. It all starts with them, and if they can really open up the holes and give their skill guys the ability to win those one-on-one matchups, especially once they break through the first line of defense, right? And then I think that that's a very good thing to see if you're an offensive coordinator for Mamaroneck. And defensively, I feel like they've really been shining. I feel like the fact that they give the many opportunities for their offense to get some points on the board is really what's impressive. And the fact that, like you mentioned, 2 out of the 16 in points allowed.
Yep. so far.
I mean, yeah, you win the football games by scoring more points than your opponent, and the defense has definitely been setting their offense up quite often for that. But then when you take a look at Scarsdale, I think for offensively, like you said, they have a lot of these stable of backs, these stable of skill players that can really effectively run the scheme in which Scarsdale has been known for. And the most important thing is about winning the early downs and really setting yourself up to kind of keep moving and trugging along, right? You have to own the time of possession, and that really starts with the defense. You have to be able to, every time a Mamaroneck gets the ball, you really are kind of playing with an edge to yourself, and they have been. Like you said, they haven't really been the biggest of guys out there, but they've been aggressive.
Last week they were.
Yeah, they've been.
They played complementary football last week,
yeah.
Right? Offense controlled the game clock, defense avoided the team from getting into the end zone and forced turnovers.
Yeah, exactly. You got to play with that aggressiveness, play with that attitude. And I feel like that if they can do that, then it's going to give their offense a lot more time with the ball, and that means more points for you.
Absolutely. Let's go to another matchup, Mars. And this is a non-league matchup, but always an interesting battle. When Carmel 3-0 in League B goes at John Jay East Fishkill, who's 2-1. There's a non-league. John Jay's in C, Carmel's in B. And if there was one team, Mars, that has over the last couple of years that have given Carmel kind of headaches, it's probably John Jay East Fishkill. I mean, they're 10-5 versus Carmel since 2004. They have won 6 of the last 8 matchups versus Carmel, but last time they played each other in the spring, Carmel won 31-0. They gave them a thwomping last time they played. Really intriguing matchup. Carmel last week obviously had a huge victory versus New Rochelle. John Jay East Fishkill won at Ossining. And I'm going to start with Carmel. First, overall Carmel, I wanted to see how do they react after a big victory like that? Do they come a little deflated, right? After a really emotional high from that big victory, are they going to have that same edge that they had last week? I'm interested to see that. But offensively, Mars, they showed their strength. They showed that they're physical up front, that if they can play their game versus anybody, right? They moved New Rochelle around, right? Those offensive linemen, guys like Bolin, Danvin, Telesco, those tight ends like Fusco, their fullbacks, Rosafort, they were pushing people around. And to me, that showed that, hey, they could play that game with anybody, including East Fishkill, who normally has pretty big size, and they like to put guys over the guards and try to force you to, they try to force you not to run inside. I still think Carmel has the ability that they can, and it starts obviously with their running backs, guys like Massey last week, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, but I think it was huge to have a guy like Dylan Shields. While Massey's a little bit beat up, nursing a knee, Dylan Shields stepped up. He had 90 yards rushing, Mars, 21 yards receiving. He was a guy, dual threat guy who can help you in the run game and in the passing game. They didn't ask Dahl to do a lot throwing the ball. He was 5 of 6 with 83 yards, but you get that guy in the edge. He had a rushing touchdown. He really puts a lot of pressure on the edge. And so we know they have the wide receivers that they can target to the outside. Guys like Fiore and DeLeo and Kay. So, obviously, they're going to play their game plan, Mars, which is downhill running, play action off that, get their quarterback on the edge, and try to hit some big plays with these receivers. And to me, no matter, even if it's East Fishkill coming out and putting guys over the guards, it shouldn't change your game plan, right? It might change which gap you want to attack a little bit more, right? Maybe you go a little bit off tackle more. But they're going to do downhill running. They're going to bring in their tight ends and fullbacks, and they should until someone proves that they can stop them. Defensively, again, you're going to see some two-back pistol. You're going to see some spread gun. East Fishkill's come out with a lot of young players coming back, Mars. A lot of young players starting off on the varsity. They've had a couple weeks. They like to keep it simple, but they want to execute. And they'll take their chances downfield to some of their big targets like Peyton. But listen, Carmel's front is a nasty front, and we saw that last week, and this is a front that could dominate. And I know East Fishkill has some size up front, but I do think Carmel has the speed advantage. They only allowed 104 yards last week and 0 points versus New Rochelle, Mars. I think Carmel wants to make a statement. It's winning the trench battle on the defensive side of the ball with that front seven. They can cause a lot of headache. And they can get pressure on the quarterback. I think the secondary will have some opportunities for some turnovers. When I look at East Fishkill, Mars, offensively, again, they have solid size up front. They're up against a very physical and fast defense. I look at their quarterback, right, Jake Vanderoff. He's a junior, right? He's a young guy still. He had a pass touchdown last week. He did have an interception, and that's going to be the big key, right? Protecting the football. You do not want to give Carmel extra opportunities on offense, so protecting the football is going to be big. I think East Fishkill they're one of the best teams in their screen game. when you have an aggressive defense, you have to take advantage of screens, right? So I can imagine some counters are coming. I can imagine some screens are coming. I think they're going to start off throwing some quick passes to get the quarterback comfortable, guys to like Peyton, Martini, Bastone. And then when they get into some max protection looks, try those downfield shots because they're going to have to hit a few, but they're going to have to make sure the quarterback's protected or it could be a long day. Defensively, listen, last week I thought the linebackers had a strong game. They're going to need to have another one, right? Crouch, Finn Vanderstuff. Those guys played big, Martini, another guy, and they're going to have to attack the line of scrimmage in a hurry or Carmel's going to just run downhill on them. And these linemen, these tight ends, these fullbacks are going to be wailing on these linebackers. So the linebackers, they can't hesitate. And quite frankly, they probably should bail out to stop the run and give guys like Peyton in that secondary. They're going to have to rely on them to make plays. Because if they can't stop the run, Mars, they're going to lose this game. Let's just be quite frank. Mm-hmm. If they run downhill like they did against New Rochelle, they have no chance. So to me, stopping the run is going to be huge, Mars. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, Carmel, I think was, I was looking at all their comments after the game, and I felt like it was exactly what we were saying about them, is that this was a game for them to kind of shine and make a point that they are the best team in AA. And a lot of the guys on the team were making that same idea, the same point. And I feel like it was definitely a big iconic win for them, right? And I think that this was kind of like a culmination of many years of really competing, right? And competing, and then they finally can now. Granted, it's not like we act like it's the section title or anything. This is really just a big victory that kind of establishes himself. Establishes himself as saying, "Hey, we are a top team in AA. We beat the top dogs that have consistently always been there, right?" So now it's going to be the question of, you are now the top dog, right? Are you now going to match that persona and keep continuing this dominance? New Rochelle, like you said, always had this mantra of, they just show up to a game and people were afraid, saying, "Hey, these New Rochelle Huguenots, they're gonna hit us," right? So the Carmel Rams have to be that same type of thing.
That's a good point.
And I feel like when you look at how Carmel plays, they do kind of meet that idea, right? We're gonna hit you in the mouth, and we have these strong guys up front, these big guys up front, and we're just gonna run you over. And then when we run you over, we're gonna now trick you and just throw it over the top when we hit the play action. And I think that's what Carmel needs to continue to keep doing, because it's working, obviously. But obviously, when you look at their defense, that's just, they have been stuffing everything possible. And when you really shut out New Rochelle High School from scoring a point, right, that's already an impressive thing, and it shows you that they have the ability to dominate, right? But it all has to do with their front, right? If they can dominate the line of scrimmage and control really any sort of movement that happens, whether it's trying to be on the outside or anything on the inside, then it's gonna make the quarterback or any offensive coordinator on the other team just life miserable, because every high school team is always trying to establish the run, right? And then things can open up after that. When you look at John Jay's Fishkill, I mean, like you said, this has kind of been one of those moments where, this is not the same Carmel and the same John Jay team that we've seen in the past, right? And I'm not saying that John Jay is bad or anything. Trust me, I don't think that at all. But normally John Jay has been always the imposing force, right? That
they're young.
The thing is, they've always been like you always wonder what type of water they're drinking over there, because they're just massive individuals. But now it feels like Carmel is kind of like that. They have this toughness and this grittiness that they seem like the imposing figure, right? When you look at New Rochelle, they've always been tough. John Jay's always been that other extremely tough team to always play up against. And now when Carmel's that guy, it's interesting to see. But when you look at John Jay, you do have good size, but you need to be smart with the football. You need to not make those unnecessary turnovers or those unnecessary mistakes, because if you do, Carmel's going to just have a win behind them, right? Yep. They're constantly acting like they have this momentum on their side on every single drive, if you ever watch. And defensively, I feel like they're going to try to hit you with smack mouth football, right? So the question is going to be, does your front seven stop them or slow them down from doing what they want to do?
Yeah.
And try to rely on your secondary, try to make a play where you, like you said already, bail out for the run. You know that Carmel's going to try to beat you with that first. And if you slow them down at least, then that means Carmel's got to do something different.
If Dahl throws it 15 to 20 times and they beat you that way, as a coach, I can live with it. Again, I'm not sure what they're going to live, what they're happy to live with, but I can't let Massey and Shields just run down my throat. Mm-hmm. Can't do it. All right, let's go to the game of the week, Mars. And this is a league matchup, big-time league matchup. Clarkstown South, 2-1 in League B at Suffern, who is 3-0, a Rockland County fight. Again, really important matchup. Both these teams are 2-0 in league play. This is going to help dictate those standings right there that we talked about earlier in the show. Historically, Clarkstown South has owned this matchup, Mars. They are 10-3 versus Suffern. They have won 6 straight, but the last time they played was 2017, so it's been a couple years since they've gone at it. But Clarkstown South, they lost to RCK last week. It wasn't a league game. Suffern won versus Arlington and got revenge for their spring matchup. Let's start with Clarkstown South. Offensively, last week I thought they showed some good things. They were getting a little bit more explosive. They were getting a little bit more balance. I saw their quarterbacks making more plays in Kerr and Holder. Those were good things that I saw. And we saw that they have weapons on the outside. Some of these guys have been stepping up and making plays. Fatera, number 24, Davis, Capolo, who lines up in the backfield, lines up in the slot, kind of their, Swiss Army knife type of player. Another guy, Chris Ale. Keep that guy in mind, number 23. This kid's 6'3", 185 pounds. Really has become a reliable target, the junior, for this offense. And then we know about their running game, that offensive line led by Sommerlin and Ryan and May with Dorcelis running the ball. He had 2 touchdowns last week. They have different guys who can make plays for them. But what killed them, Mars, they had 3 turnovers last week. They were moving the ball, but they are turning the ball over, and you can't have that and win football games. It's too difficult. So, that's going to be a huge thing, is to stop the turnovers. And this offensive line is going up against a guy like Dylan Yang and linebackers who like to stunt. They have speed. So the offensive line is going to be big for them this week to try to cover up, this aggressive style defense and this defense who's been playing really well. Now, I talked about the good things on offense, right? But defensively, this is where things were not that great, right? Clarkstown South has played good defense the first 2 weeks of the season. Last week, they had a bit of a stumble. And you can expect this from having some young guys out on the field. Last week, they gave up just way too many big plays. They could not stop the run. And so I'm looking to see these edge defenders, the defensive line, the linebackers try to step up. The first focus is obviously trying to stop Samson Joseph, who is the lightning rod for Suffern, Mars. You're going to see the spread. You're going to see the wildcat if the spread's not working. Suffern will move to things that work, but Samson Joseph is an integral part of either thing. So stopping him is going to be the most important thing. But I'm looking at guys like Chris, LaRosa, Ryan, May, Calabrese. These are guys that are going to have to step up. They gave up way too many big plays. They did not tackle well last week. They're going to have to step up again this time around if they're going to have a chance to win. If they tackle the way they did last week, they're not going to have a chance against these guys. But I'm expecting this defense to step up. When I go to Suffern side, Mars, offensively, they rushed for about 300 yards last week. Really impressive performance. Clarkstown South, like I mentioned, they struggled to stop the run, so I would imagine Suffern is going to try to test their run defense, especially on the edge. You got to give credit to this offensive line on Suffern, Mars Krebs, the rest of that O-line. They have done a really good job of opening up holes, and I'm expecting to see a heavy dose of Samson Joseph, whether it's in the Wildcat, whether it's in slot jet sweeps, or whether they put him in the backfield and hand it to him. And a guy like Dorcelli, both of these guys had over 100 yards last week. Another guy who's played really well, and I think for the last few weeks, Andre Risco, their quarterback, he has been smart with the ball. He's made some nice plays. He had 150 yards last week. He's going to have to make some plays this week to complement the run game. And I think he's been a smart guy who's made some plays. Being, again, smart with the football is going to be the big thing. But this is a guy who can move around a little bit too. When I look at defensively, Mars, Suffern's got a good defense. And you're seeing that the last couple of weeks. The defensive line and linebackers, they like to get penetration. Guys like Dylan Yang, we know is a beast, right? Guys like Desir, they like to send on stunts. The big thing to me is prevent the big play, right? You need to attack the football, attack this running game, but don't break contain, because Clarkstown South has the speed that they can really hurt you, and you want to get them passing the ball, right? Again, Clarkstown South, they've made plays, they've increased making plays in the passing game, but you have some DBs who can make some plays too, right? A guy like Harris has had an interception in 3 straight games. He can match up well with one of their receivers. It's going to be really important for this Suffern defense if they can avoid giving big plays and force Clarkstown South to drive all the way down the field, nickel and diamond it all the way down. I think they'll have a good chance of possibly forcing turnovers and making enough plays to win. Mars, what do you want to talk about before we go to the matchup and player?
Yeah, I feel like when you look at this game, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to know who's going to really have the advantage here, just because you have, South, who has a lot of these different weapons, and I feel like the biggest problem that they have is just being inconsistent with, especially when it comes to turnovers, right? I feel like they need to really ease up on that and definitely just be more efficient.
Killed them last week.
And that's the biggest thing I look at for this offense, because they have the ability to really be efficient and really have all these different dynamic type of players on the squad. And then defensively, I mean, like, I feel like you can't be that break defense. You have to be the bend but don't break. And Suffern's going to throw everything at you. I mean, we saw that they can hit you with a Wildcat, and they have these athletes that can really hurt you. So it's really going to be dependent on
Black Lightning, Samson Joseph.
Yeah, Samson Joseph is just a guy that has been so impressive, and I feel like from a defensive point of view, you have to be efficient, especially tackling, right?
Yes.
You have to rally to the ball. Everyone's got to be there.
Yes.
You can't expect one guy to tackle one of these athletes that Suffern has. And then from Suffern's point of view, they need to prioritize the run. Clearly, they can do that on pretty easily.
The O-line's getting better.
Yeah, and the O-line is...
We know Krebs is a beast, but the rest of the O-line's getting better.
Exactly, and I feel like I was going to say, like, they just keep getting better and better as the games progress, and they need to be the ones that set the tone of this game, right? If they can kind of move bodies, then it's going to be a long day for Clarkstown South, and I feel like for this game... Defensively, I feel like Suffern is just kind of continue doing what they need to do, and knowing that the Clarkstown South has issues with turning the ball over, you really want to put the hands of the game really into the secondary. Give them the chance to make a play, right? I feel like if you have the front seven causing mayhem, I think South is could definitely make a mistake, and you just need to capitalize on that mistake and get your offense back on the field.
To me, the matchup I'm actually looking at the special teams units. We always talk offense, defense, those type of battles. I'm looking at the special teams. I mean, Suffern has Samson Joseph returning the ball. He had a return touchdown against Fox Lane. They have guys who can go down there and make tackles. And Clarkstown South also has guys who can make big-time plays in special teams. Fatera, he had a return touchdown last week. He's a guy who's real fast in open field. Coppola is another guy as a punt returner, kick returner. These guys can help change field position and the kicking, Mars. They have a guy named Levins over there who he had the game-winning kick in overtime as an extra point. Extra point kickoffs, extremely important. Make sure you kick away from Samson Joseph. Don't give him more opportunities to make plays for them. Special teams is going to be a big matchup I'm looking at that could change the outcome of this game. And the player to watch has to be Samson Joseph to me on Suffern Mars. He lines up at running back, wide receiver, DB, quarterback. He's a returner. This guy had 180 yards and 3 touchdowns last week, with also getting 10 tackles. This is, he's kind of like, he stirs the pot for this team, and he's the lightning rod. They call him Black Lightning for a reason. So I'm definitely watching him. All right, Mars, let's go to the game picks. And last week, pretty solid day. I went 7-2, Mars. You went 5-4. Our friends over at Lowhud went 8-1, though. We lost to Lowhud, Mars. Come on, we gotta do better than that. But overall, I'm 23-4 in AA games. You're 19-8, and Lowhud is 23-4. All right, those are the AA. But let's get to the game picks, Marsh. You ready?
I'm ready to roll, man.
All right, let's start it off. First game, we talked about this one. Mamaroneck 3-0 at Scarsdale, who's 1-2. I think if Mamaroneck wins, Marsh, it guarantees them a spot in the top 2 in their league, I think, which will get them into the playoffs. Cox has been really efficient. I'm interested to see how this defense plays, probably against a tougher offense that they faced all season long. I picked Scarsdale to make the playoffs before the season ends, and I think this is where Scarsdale makes a run. I'm going to go with the upset, Mars. I'm going Scarsdale. I think they're going to control the tempo of the game. I think they're going to make enough plays on defense. They're not going to give Mamaroneck's offense enough time of possession to make those explosive plays in the run game, Mars. I'm going Scarsdale.
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go with Mamaroneck. I feel like Mamaroneck has definitely seized they see the opportunity in front of them, right, to win the game, secure your spot into the playoffs, and I feel like that's going to be the driving force for this team to really push forward and have a big time win here. You're going into Scarsdale, right? I feel like that's going to be a tough match to play, but I feel like they're going to live to the moment. I'm going to go pick Mamaroneck.
That is such an interesting game. Mamaroneck wins, probably seals it. If Scarsdale loses, probably means they can't find a spot in that top 2. Let's go to another game, Mars, another league game. Yonkers Brave 0-3 at New Rochelle, who's 2-1. I look at Yonkers Brave. This defense played well, I thought, last week. But offensively, do they have enough explosive plays to beat New Rochelle? And that's going to be the big question. I look at New Rochelle. They lost to Carmel. I'm interested to see how this team rebounds. And last time they lost, which was in the spring, they lost to Suffern. And next week, Mars, they the following week, they played White Plains, and they won 42-22. I'm expecting New Rochelle to bounce back. I'm expecting this offensive line to step up and the defensive front seven to step up. I'm going New Rochelle, Mars.
Yeah, I'm going to go New Rochelle. I just think that, like you said, whenever they have a bad loss or a tough loss, they always bounce back, and they always are more efficient than they definitely were the week before. I just think that Brave does not have enough firepower to just match New Rochelle. Even though this may be a younger team, the New Rochelle is still New Rochelle High School. So I'm going to go with New Rochelle here.
Arlington 1-2 in League B at Spring Valley, who's 0-3 in League B. Arlington last week, they had some drives, but they just couldn't finish against Suffern, and that's going to be really important. I thought, defensively, they just gave up way too many rush yards. So I'm expecting the defense to bounce back, and I'm expecting the front to dominate this young Spring Valley front. But Spring Valley, I got to say, they're getting better, Mars. They played North Rockland pretty tough last week. I thought the defense played pretty solid, and we talked about this. We are expecting this team to get better as the season goes along, so Arlington better not sleep. But I'm going to go with Arlington. I think the front is a little too much for Spring Valley to handle. I'm going Arlington.
Yeah, I'm going to go Arlington too. I feel like you said, I think this is going to be a game. I think that Spring Valley is definitely improving, and I feel as if, I feel like they're just one little week away from really making that big splash, but I feel like Arlington definitely has the advantage here. They have the bigger size, and I think they're just going to kind of use that to benefit them. I'm going Arlington here.
Another league game, Mars. Ossining 1-3 in League C at RCK, who's 1-2 in League C. Both these teams are trying to make a comeback into this league. Ossining's defense, I thought, played physical last week and played pretty solid the first three quarters. The big thing is stopping the run of RCK. And RCK last week, they forced turnovers on defense, even though they gave up way too many big plays. I'm interested to see how the defense plays again this time around. They really got to make more plays defensively. But offensively, they figured out the rushing game a little bit. The offensive line stepped up. Owens, Camacho. I think RCK's got a little bit too much. I'm going RCK at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go RCK as well. I feel like being at home is definitely going to give them that kind of more momentum, and the fact that they're kind of clicking a little bit more on the both offense and defensive side gives them the advantage here. I'm going to go RCK.
Yonkers Forest 1-2 in League A at Fox Lane, who's 2-1 in League C. Again, this is a non-league matchup. Yonkers Forest, I thought the offensive line played pretty well last week against their big rivals, and I know the quarterback, Olkers, I'm interested to see his encore. He was kind of the hero last week at the game-winning touchdown, but they have other guys like Sweat and Joseph who can make plays. But Fox Lane, I think Logan Matson, he had 100 yards last week and a touchdown. This guy can make some plays this week. I think he's one of the best receivers in the class. And quarterback Miller and Travis, they combined for 5 touchdowns last week. That dual-threat quarterback. Fox Lane has been an impressive, surprising team. I'm going with Fox Lane, Mars.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. Fox Lane is going to be my pick. I feel like they, like you said, offensively they just have been clicking, and I feel like they just have more weapons than Yonkers Forest. It was definitely a game to watch, and that Superintendent's Cup was great. I just feel like Fox Lane just has more weapons there. I'm going to go with them.
North Rockland 1-2 in League B at Mount Vernon, who's 2-1 in League A, non-league game. We talked about these games. The teams haven't played since 2011. I'm going to go with North Rockland, Mars. I think North Rockland is a little bit more physical. They're going to have a little bit more speed out on the edge, and they're going to bottle up Mount Vernon's playmakers from getting an open field. I'm going with North Rockland.
Yeah, I'm going to agree here. I think that they just have more athletes on their side, and I think that their run downhill, that play is definitely just going to meet to what they want to do, and Mount Vernon just won't have enough to really stop them there. I'm going to go North Rockland.
White Plains 2-1 in League C at Port Chester, 0-3 in League C. League C matchup. Mars, I'm looking to see White Plains bounce back from that tough loss. The offense did not play well at all, and I'm seeing, looking at to see the quarterback and this pass attack get back on track. For Port Chester, Colin Taylor, that's somebody to keep in mind. He's a dynamic player on both sides of the ball. Had a forced fumble last week. Offensively, he's a guy who can hit big plays for you. White Plains is 4-1 versus Port Chester. They won 3 straight. I think they're going to make it 4. I'm going White Plains on a bounce back.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. White Plains has definitely had a struggle last week, but I think their offense is going to be, back in more disciplined and more effective this week coming through. I'm going White Plains.
Carmel 3-0 in League B at John J. East Fishkill is 2-1 in League C. Does John J. East Fishkill get the upset? I don't think it's going to happen, Mars. I think Carmel's going to win this one. I could see a little bit of an emotional letdown. I could see this game be close for a little bit. But I think Carmel pulls away. I just think they got too much, and John J. Fishkill is a little too young. Carmel's got the size, and to me, it's crazy to say. I think Carmel has the size and strength advantage against East Fishkill. I'm going with Carmel.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. Carmel has definitely been on a roll. Their momentum is riding high, and I feel like, the worst thing that can happen is that they keep the game close, but then they still pull away in the end just because they start to kind of regroup and they realize, we have the ability, the athletes, and the size that can really benefit us. I'm going to go with Carmel here.
Let's go to the game of the week. Clarkstown South 2-1 in League B at Suffern, who's 3-0 in League B. Big time B matchup, Mars. Who do you got and why?
Well, this one's definitely interesting. I feel like when you look at both these teams, for instance, when you look at Clarkstown South to begin with, I feel like they have been, offensively, they have the weapons, they have the capabilities, and the biggest downfall they've had has been the turnovers. And when you take away those turnovers, you see a team that can impress, right? And they can move the ball, and they just have what it takes to be a very successful team in this class, right? And then when you look at Suffern, right? Last year was definitely one of those, one in a lifetime types of teams where they just were dominating on all fronts, right? And they were the underdogs throughout the entire year, and then they just showed out and were really shocking the world. And when you look at this team this year, they do have the capabilities of just pure run dominance right up front, especially when you have some of these guys like Samson Joseph that have just been proven to be a just excellent player. And then you have guys like Dylan Yang on the defensive side who've also been impressive. So when you look at this matchup, I'm going to go with Suffern. And the reason why is because I think that Suffern has not made enough mistakes for me to be worried about whether the offense can move or whether the defense can give a big play. Clarkstown South, unfortunately, has given me some of that, just the turnovers, right? I feel like, and now granted, I don't think they're going to have 3 turnovers, right, again, this game. I don't think that's going to happen. But I just think that Suffern is definitely going to kind of control the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line is getting better and better each week. And then you have these skill players that have just been dominating on the run. And I just think that Suffern is kind of has that advantage going for them. And in the very least, they're home, right? They have the home field advantage added on. Clarkstown South is a good team. I just think that they've made some mistakes. They put themselves in a really tough spot, and it's really hard to climb out of that spot. So I think it's going to be a tough rebound game for them. So I'm going to go with Suffern here.
Clarkstown South's next 4 games are tough, Mars. At Suffern versus Carmel versus Mamaroneck and versus Arlington. Again, that's a tough group. The next 3 games, their opponents are 9-0. So really tough stretch in the schedule. I do think Clarkstown South defense is going to bounce back, and offensively, I agree. I don't think they're going to have as much turnovers as last time. This hurts me because I'm going against my South community, and I still like this South team, but I'm going to go with Suffern. I think Clarkstown South has a mixture of youth and veterans, a nice mixture, and you see that they have potential, right? But sometimes that youth shows, and it shows with the turnovers, and it shows with the inconsistency on defense. And Suffern, a little bit more of a veteran group. They haven't made a bunch of mistakes since week 1, and I think that's going to be the difference. Clarkstown South tends to make a few more mistakes. Suffern does not. Suffern is also home. I think they have a home field advantage there. I think it's going to be a close one, Mars, but I'm going to go with Suffern as well. All right, everyone, that was our show. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We hope you guys have a tremendous football weekend, and we'll see you all very soon.